What do we mean by a god? Because if by a god you mean the uncreated creator of everything, there logically can be only one. You can't have infinite uncreated being and then another infinite uncreated being. Those two things don't make sense. If that's what you mean by God, the kind of capital G sense of God, then if by God you just mean a powerful spiritual being, there can be many, and there are many. We call them angels and demons. Other cultures have called them by other names, jinn, gods, whatever, demigods. Those things exist. Now, not all of them. Some of those are, works of fiction. Some of those are human imagination. But without a doubt, like some of the things people were worshiping really were spiritual beings. St. Paul is crystal clear about that. For instance, in 1 Corinthians 10, when he talks about pagans making sacrifices to demons, what they're calling a god, we call a demon. We recognize its existence. That's not a conflict with monotheism, which talks about God in the capital G sense. One of the things you see clearly laid out in the biblical narrative, and a great place to see this would be, for instance, in the book of Exodus, where you see the superiority of capital G God over the so-called gods of the Egyptians. Look at how the snake of Aaron, and when the rod turns into a snake, is able to devour the snakes that the Egyptian magicians are able to do. They have a spiritual power, but it's inferior to the true power of God. You can see this as well in a totally different way in the story of Jonah. Jonah is having trouble fully grasping the fact that God is not just the local God of the Israelites, he's the God of everyone, even the enemies of the Israelites, like the Ninevites. And so as a result, he goes to sea to try to get away from God, but precisely because God is not just this local territorial deity, God is able to find him even on the ocean. And so the whole event of, Jonah and the whale is Jonah coming to grips with the universality of God and the universality of the love of God. And you have this, there's a whole story in this where it seems like it really takes the Babylonian exile for the Israelites to fully understand this. God had been saying this for centuries, and people would turn away and they'd worship other gods. Or when they'd go to a new region, they would worship the local gods. And it's really only after the Babylonian captivity, when they realized that the God of Israel is with them even there, that they seem to be disillusioned of the notion of henotheism and polytheism in any of those senses. So, were people worshiping gods other than the true God? Absolutely. And did some of these gods exist, even though we don't consider them God in the same sense God is? Yeah, also true.